Hey everybody, and welcome to a short video taking a look at a couple of Hydroid changes that came in update 21.5. With the Hydroid revisit, a lot of questions were asked and a lot of feedback was given, and today we saw the first iteration of that feedback being implemented. Tempest Barrage got a very minor tweak to have an audio cue to give it a better idea of when the ability is being charged. Although that being said, I haven't really noticed it. If you hadn't have told me it was there, I probably wouldn't have noticed. So maybe it needs to be a bit more pronounced, or maybe it's just a me thing and I just can't hear it. I don't really know. Undertow, however, is where the real changes have come and have turned Hydroid into a bit of a monster damage dealer. I know it sounds crazy, right? My last video I said Hydroid's damage was really rather pathetic, and now I'm here saying he's a monster damage dealer. So what's changed? Well, let's get the thing that sounds like a nerf out of the way. The damage done beforehand by Undertow was all finisher damage, which means it completely ignored armor. So no matter how heavily armored or highly armored the target was, it would always do the same damage. In this patch, it got changed to being impact damage, which is affected by armor. However, the next two changes really show where Undertow is going in terms of damage. The damage scales per tick, like it did in the revisited update, but now it's a percentage of the enemy's health inside the puddle, and we all know that percentage scaling abilities scale infinitely better than ones with fixed numbers. But the damage per second also scales with how many enemies you have inside the puddle as well, and gives a massive increase to the scaling damage from Undertow. This all combines to mean that against anything without armor, so the Corpus and the Infested, even the highest level units at any stage of the game die super quickly, but they suffer really badly against anything with armor. This though is where one of your augments come in. This was one of the first things I tried on stream last night. 170% power strength build that I talked about in my previous video, except that I used the corroding barrage augment. If you go into your puddle, bring all the enemies inside that puddle you want, and then cast your corroding barrage on top of the puddle, all the enemies inside get hit with wave upon wave of corrosive procs, quickly stripping armor, and meaning you can kill even level 150 heavy gunners and bombards in, 3 to 5 to 10 seconds flat. Something the old Hydroid wouldn't even have dreamed of. This is an insane buff to Hydroid's damage dealing ability, and while, yes, it does mean you're stuck in the puddle still, something that I still do but not particularly like, at least you can do some pretty amazing things to help your team with it. In fact, as I said on stream, depending on the next event we have, I might even take Hydroid on my endurance team, especially if this synergy between the damage from Undertow and the armor stripping from corroding barrage remains a thing. I've seen already people saying it's too strong, it should get nerfed, it's unintended. Don't forget it's an ability that is pretty much static. You rely on enemies to get close enough to either fall in or you pull them in. I don't see any problem with this ability being too strong. It's an ability like this that hits mobility as hard as Undertow does, should have a super strong element to it to make it worth your while doing it. This is that niche, at least as far as I'm concerned. The very latest news on this, actually since I'm editing this in after I recorded the original audio, is a tweet from Rebecca saying that the feeling right now is that they are going to be keeping this the way it is, which is fantastic news to me. Another addition to Undertow is that you can shoot into the puddle and damage enemies inside the puddle. The damage done is 50% of the total damage of the shot, which is then divided equally between the number of enemies in the puddle. So say for example your shot did 1000 damage, 500 of that would be transferred into the puddle, which say for example you had 5 enemies in there, it would transfer 100 damage to each of those enemies, and that is affected by armor. It's a pretty fantastic change, to be honest. No more Hydroid slowing down your mission by hoarding a bunch of enemies inside his puddle that you can do nothing about. So this combined with the extra damage of the puddle means that you are going to be able to counter those that want to troll with him. We did a bit of testing with various different things. We found that indirect damaging abilities like Ember's World on Fire would not hit enemies inside the puddle. Direct ones like Peacemaker wouldn't either. But something like the Zenistar disc on top of the puddle, or something like a Maiming Strike Atarax over the top of the puddle will in fact hit the enemies inside. So you can melee the bubble to hit the enemies that are under the water. Be aware though that should an ancient healer be pulled in still, the split damage will mean the enemies other than the healer will be hit, and that will heal the healer, and getting the damage reduction from that healer as well. So if a Hydroid was trying hard enough, he could still troll his team, and there really isn't a way around that, to be honest. There were a couple of minor tweaks to his fourth ability as well to make the tentacles less ragdolly. so that we can have an easier time shooting those that are caught by a tentacle. Though, to be honest, I haven't really noticed it that much, and still have just as hard of a time hitting things that are being flailed around as before. As for that, it got improved spawning on walls, things like that. More of an aquatic casting noise. It's nothing too amazing here. Does it change my opinion on a Hydroid? No, not at all. It's still focused around that puddle, which I despise. It's the most boring gameplay in the game without fail. At least though, now with his puddle, Hydroid can have a bit of a niche as a scaling damage dealer, to the extent where I might use him, like I said earlier, for an endless endurance run, depending on what that run is. It's a fantastic change that still doesn't really change any of the problems I talked about in my previous video. If you dislike Hydroid's gameplay, more damage on his 3 is not going to convince you otherwise. At this point, it would take rebuilding Hydroid from the ground up, I think. However, I would say that this is unlikely as it stands. So any buffs to his existing kit, especially a buff this strong, is something I really like seeing. So I hope you enjoyed my quick sum up of Hydroid's new changes. He's one hell of a damage dealer now. Plus the synergy with his corroding barrage is something that is really very nice. Not enough to convince me to play Hydroid more often outside of very specific situations though, but it is certainly a very welcome buff. Thank you all so much for watching this, and I shall see you in the next video.